A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You know, for a long time, the unwritten rule of the job market was that you could either do well or you could do good, but you definitely could not do both at the same time. If you wanted to change the world, you had to be comfortable with a diet of ramen noodles and a bank account that stayed perpetually near zero. The passion tax was real, and it was steep.
The famous starvation cycle. It is a concept that has defined the nonprofit world for decades. The idea that every dollar spent on a competitive salary or a modern office is somehow a dollar stolen from the mission. But what we are seeing right now, especially looking at the data from this month, March 26, is that the wall between the high-flying private sector and the mission-led world is not just cracking, it is basically being demolished. The assumption that mission-led work equals poverty wages is becoming a relic of the past.
It is about time. Today's prompt from Daniel is about exactly this shift. He is asking if working for a mission-led organization still necessitates a lower salary, and what the growth areas look like in this new landscape. He is specifically looking at the evolution of non-governmental organizations and non-profits as we head into the middle of 2026.
I am Herman Poppleberry, and I have been diving into the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports that came out on March 6th. The numbers are actually staggering. The nonprofit sector now accounts for 10.4% of total United States private sector employment. That is 1 in 10 workers, and it is growing at nearly 3% year over year. We are not talking about a niche corner of the economy anymore. This is a massive, professionalized engine of the labor market that is increasingly being referred to as the impact economy.
10% of the private sector workforce is a huge footprint. But the real question Daniel is hitting on is the money. Is it still a passion tax, or are these organizations finally paying up? Because historically, the passion tax was basically a hidden subsidy that workers gave to the organization. You accept 20% less pay because you feel good about the logo on your business card.
That is the theory, but the data from the Candid Nonprofit Compensation Trends report released on March 18th shows a massive divergence. We are entering an era where the label nonprofit is becoming less of an economic descriptor and more of a tax filing distinction. The lines are blurring between B Corp, social enterprises, and traditional 501c3s. If you are in an entry-level administrative role, yeah, you are probably still lagging about 15% behind the private sector. But if you have a specialized technical skill, the gap has almost evaporated. We are seeing 95% salary parity for roles in data science, legal compliance, and cybersecurity within large NGOs.
Wait, 95%? That is basically a rounding error when you factor in benefits. Why the sudden rush to pay market rates? Is it just competition, or has something shifted in how these organizations are funded?
It is both, but the catalyst is a shift in philosophy from the big donors. Look at what happened on March 12th. The Gates Foundation announced a $1.8 billion initiative called the Human Capital Initiative. Mark Sussman, the chief executive officer there, has been very vocal about this. He is essentially saying that if you want to solve the world's most complex problems, you cannot do it with amateur hour. He is specifically targeting the professionalization of NGO leadership in the Global South. He is calling the old 10% overhead cap a relic of the past and arguing for overhead flexibility.
It is funny, because for years, donors looked at overhead as a sign of waste. If a non-profit spent money on a nice office or a competitive salary for a chief technology officer, they were raked over the coals by charity watchdogs. Now, the biggest foundation in the world is saying that underinvesting in people is actually the waste because it leads to failure. It is the overhead myth finally being debunked.
It is a logical pivot. If you are trying to manage a $4.2 billion grant for climate adaptation, which is what the Green Climate Fund just authorized on March 4th, You cannot have a junior staffer who is burned out and looking for a way out to a tech startup. You need a seasoned infrastructure expert. These are massive engineering and social projects.
Let's talk about those growth areas Daniel mentioned. Climate adaptation is obviously huge. We're seeing a move away from just awareness and toward actual hard infrastructure. Managed retreat is a phrase I'm hearing more and more. It sounds like a polite way of saying we are moving entire cities away from the water.
That is exactly what it is. Managed retreat involves the strategic relocation of communities and infrastructure from areas vulnerable to sea level rise or chronic flooding. And the technical requirements for those roles are intense. You need hydrologists, urban planners, GIS experts, and civil engineers. These people can work anywhere. If an NGO wants them, they have to compete with real estate developers and government agencies. That is why the salary parity is hitting 95% in those niches. The mission is the tiebreaker that helps the NGO win the talent, not the excuse for a lowball offer.
What about the AI side of things? Daniel mentioned AI ethics and governance. I saw that Joy Bolamwini, pronounced Buolamwini, and her Algorithmic Justice League are having a massive hiring surge for policy analysts. That feels like a very specific 26-era job.
It is essential. As AI systems are integrated into everything from hiring to healthcare, the oversight is not coming from the government fast enough. NGOs are stepping into that vacuum to act as the watchdogs. They need people who understand the math behind the models, but also the legal frameworks of civil rights. That is a rare combination. If you have those skills, you are in the driver's seat. These organizations are no longer just advocacy groups. They are technical auditors. They are hiring data scientists to deconstruct biased algorithms, and those data scientists expect to be paid like data scientists.
It sounds like the impact economy is blurring the lines. We talked about this a bit in episode 1353 when we looked at the impact paradox, the idea that solving a problem can sometimes kill the profit motive that was sustaining the solution. But here, the professional structures are catching up to avoid that trap.
A March study from the Wharton School found that 65% of large NGOs, those with budgets over $50 million, are now offering what they call the total rewards model. They are matching 401k contributions and, crucially, offering student loan repayment programs.
Student loan repayment is a genius move for NGOs. If you can attract a Harvard law grad by saying, "We will pay your loans if you work for us for 5 years," you've just secured world-class talent for a fraction of what a big law firm would pay them in total compensation, but the employee still feels financially stable because their biggest debt is being erased.
It is a win-win, but we have to talk about the friction this is causing. It is not all sunshine and competitive salaries. There was a major controversy on March 15th. The NGO Transparency Project leaked salary data from 3 of the biggest international relief agencies. It showed executive salaries exceeding $800,000.
$800,000? That is a lot of donor money going to one person. I can hear the donors screaming from here.
It is, especially when the same leak showed that field staff in conflict zones, the people actually delivering the aid under fire, were still on month-to-month contracts with very little job security and no health benefits. That has sparked a massive backlash within the sector. There is a movement called Nonprofit AF, led by Vu Le, pronounced Vu Le, and they are demanding a 5-to-1 ratio between the highest and lowest paid employees in any organization.
A 5-to-1 ratio is aggressive. Most major corporations are closer to 300-to-1. If an entry-level person makes $50,000, the CEO would be capped at $250,000. That would definitely change the executive suite at some of these big NGOs.
It is a push for pay equity that reflects the values of the mission. The argument from the nonprofit AF community is that you cannot claim to be fighting for equity in the world while maintaining massive wealth gaps inside your own office. It is a real tension point. How do you attract a top-tier CEO who could be making millions at a Fortune 500 company without paying the $800,000, while also keeping the ratio fair for the person answering the phones or working in the field?
I can see both sides. From a conservative management perspective, you want efficiency. If an $800,000 CEO can bring in an extra $100 million in funding through their network and expertise, they have paid for themselves many times over. But if the rank-and-file workers are miserable and can't pay their rent, the whole culture of the organization rots from the inside. It is a management nightmare.
And it is why the Ford Foundation, under Darren Walker, is pushing for what they call trust-based philanthropy. The old model was that a donor would give you money for a specific project, say building 10 wells in a specific village, and you couldn't spend a cent of it on salaries or rent. It was all restricted. Trust-based philanthropy gives multi-year unrestricted funding. It basically says, we trust you to know how to run your business. Use this money to hire good people, give them stable careers, and pivot as the situation on the ground changes.
That seems like the only way to break the starvation cycle. If you only have funding for 12 months, you can only hire people on 12-month contracts. You can't build a career on that. You can't get a mortgage on a 12-month contract. You can't plan a life.
Stability is a form of compensation. If an NGO can offer a 5-year horizon because they have unrestricted funding, that is worth more than a slightly higher salary at a volatile startup that might go under in 6 months. This is the structural reality of the 2026 labor market.
So, to Daniel's question, can these roles offer a stable financial future? It sounds like the answer is a very loud yes, provided you are in the right niche and at the right scale of organization. But how does a listener actually evaluate that? If I am looking at a job posting for an NGO, how do I know if they are part of this new professionalized wave or if they are still stuck in the starvation cycle?
You have to look at their funding model. During the interview, ask what percentage of their funding is unrestricted and multi-year. If they are living grit to mouth, you are going to be underpaid and overworked. But if they have a diversified portfolio of trust-based grants, you are looking at a stable career path. Also, look for that total rewards model. If they aren't talking about 401k matching or loan repayment in 26, they are behind the curve.
And what about the growth drivers? We mentioned climate and AI. Daniel also mentioned mental health infrastructure. Post-pandemic long-term care is still a massive issue in 26. That seems like a sector that is less about high-tech data science and more about massive human-to-human scale. How does the compensation work there?
That is where the challenge remains. Community-based health nonprofits are seeing huge demand, but they are often tied to government reimbursement rates, which are notoriously slow to adjust. So while the Gates Foundation can decide to pay more for a data scientist, a local mental health clinic might be stuck with what the state pays for a Medicaid patient. That is where you still see the passion tax being extracted most heavily.
So we have a two-tier system emerging. The high-tech, global NGOs are reaching parity with the private sector, while the local, service delivery nonprofits are still struggling. It is almost like the difference between working for a global tech firm and a local mom-and-pop shop, even though they are both technically in the same sector.
That is a very accurate way to look at it. If you are looking for financial stability in the mission-led world, you want to look for organizations operating in high-growth, high-technical debt sectors like climate resilience and AI governance. These are the areas where the funding is flooding in and the talent war is the most intense.
It is a strange new world when we are telling people to look for high-growth technical niches in the non-profit sector to secure their financial future. But the numbers don't lie. If you have the skills, the mission is no longer a financial death sentence. In fact, in some cases, the benefits in the total rewards model can actually make an NGO more attractive than a mid-tier for-profit company that is cutting corners on healthcare or retirement to please shareholders.
It really is a shift in the value proposition. In the private sector, you are often working to maximize shareholder value. In the impact economy, you are working to maximize a specific outcome. Carbon sequestration, algorithmic fairness, mental health stability. And the market is finally starting to realize that those outcomes require the same level of talent as building a better ad tracking algorithm.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is this shift in how we view overhead. For decades, we were trained to look at those pie charts in the annual reports and look for the smallest slice possible for administration. But if that small slice means the people running the program are underpaid and overwhelmed, the big slice for the program is probably being wasted. We are finally moving toward a more holistic view of what it costs to actually change the world.
It is the professionalization of purpose. We are seeing people jump from the private sector to NGOs and then back again. It is becoming a fluid labor market. You don't have to leave your career behind to join a mission. You just bring your career to a different set of problems. The passion tax is evolving from a mandatory sacrifice into a choice about what kind of risk you want to take.
I think we have covered the landscape pretty well. Daniel, as always, thanks for the prompt. It is fascinating to see how the labor market is revaluing what it means to do meaningful work. Will the impact economy eventually fully absorb the nonprofit sector into the broader labor market? Only time will tell, but the trend lines are clear.
It really is. And I think we are going to see even more of this as the distinction between a for-profit company that does good and a nonprofit that is run efficiently continues to fade. The goal is the same, solving complex problems with the best talent available.
Which is probably a good thing for everyone involved. Except maybe the people who really liked those cheap ramen noodles.
I think they will survive the transition to a better salary and a more stable retirement plan.
Fair point. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this show. We couldn't do this deep dive into the March 26 data without that infrastructure.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you are enjoying these deep dives into the shifting economy, a quick review on your favorite podcast app really helps us reach more people who are trying to navigate these changes.
You can also find our full archive and search for topics like geographical arbitrage or career longevity at myweirdprompts.com.
We will be back next time with another prompt from Daniel. Until then, keep asking the weird questions.
Goodbye, everyone.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My Weird Prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep